So I cannot wait to get into the rest of these books. Like I said, there are 10. I did not say that. Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey, and we're about to get very, very dirty with my September wrap-up. So today we are here to wrap up my September reading, which is quite a task ahead of us, I'm not gonna lie. If many of you, I'm sure know, but in September I participated in 2 separate readathons. I participated in Magical Readathon, which is hosted by G over at Book Roast, and Book Upathon, which is hosted by Becca and the Books. So I had the most ambitious of TBRs. I think I calculated, and if I had read every single thing I wanted to, I would be at like 18 books that month, I want to say. So, spoiler, I did not do that. I ended up reading 15 books, which is still incredible. I can't even believe I got that close. But I read everything I wanted to. I read all the books on my personal TBR game. I read the books that I'd put on that TBR for like my fall reads to kind of start getting into some of the more fall books that I wanted to get to instead of keeping them all in October. And just some books I was really excited about. So I'm actually really proud of how I did. So I did vlog the entire month. I will leave all of those down below if you would like to check them out. There are 4 videos for you. Those will be like my real-time reactions. I'll go over kind of what fits what prompt, that kind of thing. We're just here to wrap up all of the books. So get cozy. I have my fun little new Hello Fall sweater on. It's a little toasty, but I wanted the cozy vibes. Grab yourself a nice hot drink and get settled, because we got lots to go over. So like I said, I read 15 books, and of those 15 books, I read a total of 4,913 pages. And that was over 3 audiobooks, 5 physical books, and 7 mixed. My age categories were a little more spread out than they have been in the past, kind of. I had 2 middle grade, 3 YA books, 2 new adult books, and 8 adult books. My genres were pretty contained and spread out at the same time. We had 5 romance books, 6 fantasy books, 2 contemporary, 1 nonfiction, and 1 mystery. And as far as my star ratings goes, again, pretty normal for me. We had 4 5 stars, 8 4 stars, 2 3 stars, and I did actually have 1 DNF, which is included in all of the stats, but I don't rate my DNFs. So let's just get right on into the books I read. So the first book that I picked up was 13 Treasures by Michelle Harrison. This is the first in a trilogy, 13 Treasures trilogy. This is the author who wrote A Pinch of Magic, and this is a series about fairies. So we follow our main character Tanya, who has a secret. She can see fairies, and they are not nice to her. So because of that, her mom thinks she's trying to gain attention, and so she sends her off to her grandmother's for a couple of months, or a couple of weeks that summer. And while she's there, she discovers this news clipping of a girl that went missing 50 years ago, and discovers a connection between this girl and her grandmother, and she and the caretaker, I think is his name, or his title, the caretaker's son, kind of try to figure out some stuff, try to find some mysteries, solve some things around the house. This is very reminiscent of the Spiderwick Chronicles, so if you like that series, I think you'll enjoy this one. It's definitely more upper middle grade. I honestly did not pay too much attention to how it was written, so it didn't feel like it was written any specific way, but it did cover some very tough subjects, which is why I'm thinking it's kind of upper middle grade. But I really did enjoy this book. I gave it, I think, 4.5. Yeah, I gave it 4.5 stars. It, like I said, it dealt with some tough subjects that I've never seen in middle grade before, and it's more of like a couple of them were just hinted at, so if you didn't know, you wouldn't know, but if you were a little older like me reading back on it, you're like, oh, so that's a thing that they're talking about. Cool. But also it's very it has this very creepy undertone to it because there's this whole mystery with the woods and the fairies in the woods, and that has a very creepy aspect to it. So this is, I think, perfect for transitioning from summer to fall because it does take place in the summer. It's very warm, it's during the summer break, but it does have those creepy undertones to it to give you that kind of first step into fall. One thing that I will say about this is, like I said, this is the first in a trilogy, so not everything is wrapped up in this, but this would make a perfect standalone. If you decided you didn't want to continue, then like this is wrapped up in a way that not everything is solved, but enough is solved that you are happy with it. So I'm excited to see where we could go from here because I'm honestly not 100% sure. There were some reveals in here that weren't really reveals. I could definitely see them coming a mile away, so I had to keep reminding myself, even though it has these tougher subjects in it, that it is made for younger kids, so it's kind of written in a way that's supposed to be easier for you to kind of catch on to those things. So there's some things that like we met some characters and immediately I was like, oh, that person is going to be able to do this specific thing, or that person is the one who was in this situation, or that person did this, and I was right. So it's kind of a mixture of older middle grade to younger YA, maybe is a good way to describe it, but I did very much enjoy this, and I cannot wait to continue with this series. So I did read this with my lovely friend Teresa. I will leave her channel linked down below, and I can't wait to continue with the rest. I just hit myself in the face. The next book I picked up was People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I wanted to get one of my last kind of summer books in before it technically hit fall, and I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars as well. I adored this book. So this follows two friends, Poppy and Alex, who became friends in college, and they've just gone on trips every single summer. It's just the two of them going on vacation. She's kind of made a career out of it, kind of being like a content creator online, a vlogger, she just kind of goes places. And he, I think, is a teacher. And then something happens 2 years prior to the present time in this book, and they stop going on vacations for a couple of years, but she reconnects with him and tries to get him back to go because she's missed it. This is written in kind of two timelines. You've got the present timeline, and those chapters are kind of broken up with this past timeline, and it's just different summers and different experiences that they had during these past summers they've had, and it kind of solidifies and explains their relationship a little bit, which I really enjoyed seeing that build up of these characters. I think if you like friends to lovers, like that kind of trope, this is top tier friends to lovers because everything about their relationship felt so real. Like they are so polar opposites of each other, and everything about their friendship is messy, but that made it more realistic for me, and I personally adored this. I also really liked that Poppy, I don't actually know how old she is, but she's kind of having like a quarter life crisis maybe, where she's been doing the same thing for so long, and now she's kind of questioning if that's even what she wants to do, and kind of what is it that she wants to do, what is it that she wants from life, and because she's not sure, she can't really let anybody else in her life, and so it's their whatever they are kind of going on this vacation. So again, top tier friends to lovers, and that's not usually my favorite trope. I prefer enemies to lovers personally, but I really liked it. I am a huge Emily Henry fan. I liked that she's able to like craft these characters and create development with them so well, but at the same time still have plenty of plot so that you're not just kind of, if you're like me and you're a plot driven person, you're not bored with all of this character development because things are happening. And I loved it, so I cannot wait to continue with more things by this author. I know I've got Beach Read by her, and I believe she's coming out with a new book next year called Book Lovers, I want to say, and everything about that sounds great. So yeah, I adored this book. The next book I ended up picking up was The Roommate Risk by Talia Hibbert, which is one of her first, I'm not sure if it's like, it's not her debut novel, but it's one of her earlier books that she was really proud of and is one that she really enjoyed and loved, and so I was like, oh, I loved the Brown Sisters series, I have to give this one a shot. Well, it got 3.5 stars from me. I honestly didn't really like it. The plot was kind of mediocre. I didn't feel connected to any of the characters, and I think that some people will. I mean, our main character, whose name I am completely forgetting, but the main female character is very messy and doesn't really know what she wants, and I feel like that can be relatable, but at the same time I didn't really believe their relationship. Like, I believed their friendship because we did get some I mean, it was mostly present day stuff, but occasionally you would get some chapters in the past of like how they kind of related to one each other, how they kind of became friends, that kind of thing. It was dual perspective between the two of them, but it honestly, like, I was bored most of the time. I wanted it to be this fantastic thing. I had loved the Brown sisters. It's like one of my favorite romance books and like romance series, and this one just kind of fell flat. I just did not feel connected to anything that was happening. And I mean, like, there were some things that happened about halfway that kind of like picked up the plot for me and made it more interesting, but even then I was like, I mean, now I'm more interested in what is happening, but I still don't particularly care that much. It did also feel like it was a lot of telling and not showing in this book. It does kind of have the normal snarky humor of Talia Hibbert. Again, I think the Brown Sisters is snarkier and better in my opinion, but yeah, it was just okay. The next one I picked up was my Tessa Dare book, which is the Duchess Deal. This is the first in her Girl Meets Duke series. There are 3. I think there's going to be a 4th one in like 2 years. This one follows our main characters Emma and the Duke of Ashbury. We call him Ash. And Emma is a seamstress. She is a vicar's daughter, and he turned her out many years ago. And so she became a seamstress. And so she shows up to his house one day and says, look, your fiance, who is no longer your fiance, made me create this dress. You're gonna pay me for my labor, because if you don't, I'm gonna get kicked out of my house. And so on a split second decision, he decides, cool, I'm gonna marry you. And so they end up getting married, and they have this deal because he wants an heir. He has just come, not just, but he came back from war recently, and he is scarred both physically and emotionally, and so that makes him very scared to go out in public, but he knows he needs an heir because he doesn't like, I think, his cousin who would take over if he didn't have one. And so he creates this deal with her that they will be husband and wife at night only until she gets pregnant, and then once she gets pregnant, she can go off to the country estate, live a life of grandeur, do whatever the heck she wants, and then he can get an heir. And then, like, their marriage kind of will stop being a marriage. And it, of course, does not quite work that way. It's just, I loved that because we really get to see the exploration of both of these people who have been hurt in the past by people that they have loved, and they have not had the best of experiences, and so they're really there for each other and they can actually care about each other. I also love the friend group that Emma kind of creates and meets in this series, which, a fun fact, is actually carried throughout the series. I didn't realize it until the 3rd book, but each person, like each book in the series, follows a different friend in this friend group, and it's the most bizarre humans, and I love them so much. But it was really nice seeing them. I really just liked their relationship. I liked seeing these two very broken people kind of come together and really care for one another. And also, in fantastic Tessa Dare fashion, her writing is the funniest thing I've ever read. It's so humorous. The banter is great. I love, like, the dialogue conversations. I will never stop raving about Tessa Dare's writing. She is for sure a favorite. Like, I don't know if you can see, but that's my Tessa Dare, like, stack right there. And it will continue to grow, dang it. I just love, I love everything about her writing. So, if you want a very fantastic historical romance that's written in one of the best ways, in my opinion, here you go. The next book that I ended up picking up was the one that my mom picked for me from my TBR, and that is The Boys in the Boat by Daniel James Brown. And this follows 9 Americans on their quest to the 1936 Olympics. They are a rowing team in Washington, and they are made up of, like, a bunch of random people. And so, like, a lot of them are middle to lower class, and just to see them go to the Olympics. And then there's also this aspect of it being right about the time that Hitler kind of starts to gain power, and seeing Germany, the Germany that he wanted the world to see, and the Germany that actually was going on. So I think this is very well done. I personally suggest the audiobook because that's how I listened to it, and I don't think I would have gotten through it as quickly if I had just read it. I think the writing is very well done. It's very conversational in a way, like you feel like you're being told a story, but at the same time it's also kind of dry. So you've got this weird aspect, and I feel like it's a better story audibly, but this is a book that I think is really fascinating for people who both do and don't like sports. Like, I am not a sports person, and I adored this book. I ended up giving it, what did I say, 4 stars? Yeah, 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. It's really fascinating to learn about all of these different boys, because you've got chapters that kind of explain rowing and explain kind of what they're doing. You've got chapters that specifically highlight a few of the boys on this team, and then you've got chapters that kind of show you, or sections that show you kind of what's going on in Hitler's world right about now. And it's just their journey from starting the rowing team to going to the Olympics. And it's very well done, because like I said, it's good for people who like sports, because it's got all of those aspects of it. You learn about the rowing team, you learn about kind of what you need to be on this rowing team, and then for people who don't particularly like sports, you get all these aspects of historical things that are going on, as well as these kids' lives, and it's just like, it's got all the layers that are perfect for everyone. I definitely go into way more detail in my vlogs on this book, but I really enjoyed it. I think it was very well written. I still think that you should listen to it audibly if that is available to you. I highly recommend, but just to learn about these kids and how incredibly difficult it is to be a rower, it's just fascinating. And then also at the time of Hitler and kind of what's going on with him, because at this time he wanted to show Germany as like a powerful yet understanding world, and so he put it on in a very specific way. He made sure that like no anti-Jewish things were out in his country when the Olympics were happening, and then everything came back when they left. It was just kind of very interesting to see like the marketing, I guess is the best way to describe it, that he kind of did. So that people didn't expect anything from him, and then all of a sudden when he showed up and said, kabam, hey, I'm here and I'm awful, they were like, wait. So I don't know, there's lots of aspects of this that I found very fascinating, and I highly, highly recommend. The next one that I picked up was Lord of Eternal Night by Ben Alderson. So this is perfect for like spooky fall, kind of, because you have a vampire love story, basically. So you've got our two main characters, Jack and Marius is this creature who's been cursed. He stays in his house, he's not allowed to leave the grounds, and he is cursed to kind of go insane once every so many years. I don't remember exactly how many times it is. And then you've got Jack, who has been brought up by witches, and his entire coven, because of the curse on the creature human, the Marius guy, it was put on by one of their descendants, and in doing so they lost all their magic, and so they send Jack in as the latest claim, which is the person that gets sent in every so long to basically be eaten by him on the crazy night where he goes insane. But he's got magic, and his goal is to kill this creature, and in doing so he will give all his magical abilities will come back to his family. It goes so well. I'm sure you can tell how well that goes. But this is part of a series, but it is a standalone series, so it's like you can read them out of order. You can read, I think, whenever you want. You can pick and choose which one you are interested in. However, this is the only one that's out right now. I know the second one is going to be coming out sometime next year, but it's a series of standalones, basically. And I did really enjoy this. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I was happy. I was happy with my time reading. I will say that, like, he does have content warnings at the beginning, at least of this book. I'm sure he has them in the other ones. So where did it go? Here we go. Please be aware this novel contains scenes or themes of toxic relationships, murder, loss of family members, death, abuse, manipulation, anger, grief or grieving, depression, profanity, adult scenes, adult themes, and blood and gore. So just kind of be aware of all of those things going in. I would say if you are squeamish, the blood and gore is okay. Like, I read the last portion, the last like 2 chapters really late at night, and that was a terrible decision on my part because I am super squeamish and I do not like blood and gore things in books. I purposely have not been reading a lot of vampire things for that reason, but because the way this plot is, it's not as vampiric as you would expect, but I don't know, it was just really fascinating seeing these two characters together. So if any of those trigger warnings are out there for you, be wary of them. But I would say that, like, the themes of, like, grief and loss and that kind of stuff, not abusive relationships, but toxic relationships, things like that, those are more prevalent than maybe the blood and gore aspects of it, but those are also quite there. But yeah, I liked it. I can't wait to continue with more things by this author, because now I think I own everything. Yeah, I own everything that he has written currently, and he's got 3 books coming out next year. And dear Lord, I'm gonna need a shelf for him. The next book I ended up picking up was How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories by Holly Black. This is like 3.5 in her Folk in the Air series. I would highly suggest reading all 3, or like the entire trilogy, before you get into this, because there are some things that are spoiled. But I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. It is a stunning book. Like, look at these illustrations, and it feels very much like a fairy tale. However, there's kind of a collection, if you will, within this of books that revolve around this troll person, and it comes, like, there's about 3 or 4, and those I found fascinating. I actually thought that those added to the plot and added to the story, and I thought if those were the books, like that was the only stories that were in this, then I would have loved it. But they weren't. They had all these other extra stuff, which honestly I felt was unnecessary. I felt like they didn't add anything. Like, they solidified what we already knew about Prince Carden, because this is all from kind of his perspective. And so we already knew about him. It solidified some things that we had already known. It just kind of gave you a behind the scenes, a little bit into his head on some of these scenes. But again, that was already kind of fleshed out in the series already. So those aspects with the troll I found fascinating, because it did actually kind of lead to a thing that happened after the 3rd book, but everything else was just kind of like, I felt unnecessary. But it was a good, nice, cozy experience. I did like the book. It's, you know, like I said, it's stunning. So like, if you just want like a very simplistic story to sit down with for like an hour, just to like chill, decompress. If you like this world, I think this is for like the big fans of the Cruel Prince series. But if you were just kind of like a mediocre fan, then you will definitely not like this, because it didn't really add anything. It was just kind of there, you know? The next book that I read was Tender Rebel by Joanna Lindsey. I am obsessed. This is the 2nd book in the Mallory series, which is kind of reminiscent to me of the Bridgerton series, in the sense of like it follows a bunch of different people from this Mallory family. But I adored this book. I'm obsessed with her writing. I haven't read anything of hers since that like 1st book I read a long time ago, when I was first really getting into historical romance. So I was a little nervous going into this one, because I wasn't sure if like maybe I had romanticized that a little bit and it wasn't as good as I remembered. But I loved this. I just got sucked in so hard, so fast. So this follows Scottish heiress Rosalind, who kind of runs away from her home because her guardian, aka her grandfather, has died, and she has been, I think, left heir of everything. And her cousin is after her, because he'll stop at nothing to get her to marry him, so that like he can get this grand fortune. And so she comes to London basically with the goal of finding a husband, because then once she gets married, she will be protected. And then she runs into this rogue named Anthony Mallory, who is a family, like the Mallorys are known as being rogues. And so he and her kind of like, there's this attraction at first, and then he kind of helps her out. She asks for help to basically figure out who she can marry, because she doesn't have a whole lot of time to just sit around and wait. And so it's the 2 of them. And if you like the first Bridgerton book, as far as kind of the plot of Daphne and Simon, this is very reminiscent of that. So I think if you enjoy that book, you'd like this. But it does have that Scottish element, because she has been trained to kind of speak more English, but when she gets really mad, her kind of Scottish accent comes out, and it's very fascinating. But I adored this book. It was a fun, cozy, smexy historical romance, and I am a huge fan, and I just want to now devour all of the things by Joanna Lindsey. I need everything in the Mallory series now, is what I have decided. You didn't see that, but I caught that off camera, and that was impressive. I will say my favorite character in this book was Anthony. He was just fun, you know? Like, he is a rogue, and so, like, I think you do kind of switch back and forth. I think it's third person, so you do kind of switch back and forth between their perspectives a little bit. But he was just fun. He was just pure fun, and he cared a whole lot about our main character, Rosalind, and I loved them. It made me so happy. So yes, all of you lovely people who told me that the Mallory series was great, you were not kidding. So good. The next book that I ended up picking up and finishing was And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, which I did end up giving 5 stars to. I adored this book. I was completely sucked into this story. It did take me about 3 or 4 chapters into it before I really got into it. I'm sure many people know what this is about, but it basically follows 10 strangers who are brought to this deserted island called the Soldier Island, and they're all brought with different reasons, and so they kind of figure out that after a while, and then they start being killed off one by one based on this nursery rhyme, or maybe not a nursery rhyme, but this, you know, story about the 10 soldiers, and there's no one on the island but the 10 of them, and so it's fascinating. It's utterly fascinating. So once the first death started happening, that's when I started to get interesting, because like the first chapter is very, you need it because it tells you about all these different people and why they were brought to this island and kind of what their note that brought them to the island says. But beyond that, it's just them kind of settling in, talking to each other, that kind of thing. It does set up that they all have secrets, and then it's disclosed that the person who has brought them to this island and is kind of killing them off is doing so because they've all done something bad, usually ending in someone's death. Now, this is not thrillery, so if you're someone who needs suspense and you need to be on the edge of your seat, this is not for you, but this is for the people who like to get those cozy mystery books and try to sit down and, you know, like, piece all these things together and try to figure out what's going on, because that's exactly what I did the entire time I read this. I was trying to figure out who was doing what, and every time I thought I knew who it was, they died. And I was like, dadgummit! So, like, it was really fascinating to me to see what was going on. And I did not see the ending coming. Like, I don't know if you remember my vlog, but, like, I very much had, like, a shocked expression when I figured out who it was. I just think this was very well written, and it's definitely for those people who have puzzle-oriented brains. I want my husband to read this because I think he will love it. But I understand the hype with this one, and I agree. So, 5 stars for me. I loved it. Cannot wait to continue with the rest of the books I've got by Agatha Christie, because she is for me. She is for me. Then I picked up Portrait of a Scotsman by Evie Dunmore. This one came out at the beginning of September, and this is the third in the League of Extraordinary Women's series. Now, it's definitely one that I've talked about quite a lot on this channel because I've read the first 2 that came out in this series, and I've adored it. So this series, there's going to be one more. I think that's the end of this one. And it follows 4 women who are part of the Oxford Suffragette chapter. And they're all really, really close. It's their friendship, and each of these stories is their respective romances. We follow a duke in the first one. The second one follows kind of the leader of the suffragette movement. And in this one, we follow a girl named Hattie. And Hattie's father is a banker. He's got lots of monies, but he does have this rival named Lucian Blackstone, who has become very rich through maybe not best of means, but he is on a mission to kind of get more power, in a sense, as far as like trying to become more of a gentleman, more in gentleman circles, you know, do nicer things, that kind of stuff. And due to some things that happen at the beginning of the book, the 2 of them, Hattie and Lucian, are forced to get married. And I loved their romance because, I mean, I love all of Evie Dunmore's books because it does take place around the suffragette chapter, and all of them, I swear, all of them deal with this tough subject. So they are fun, awesome historical romances. Everything you want from historical romance is in these books, but they do have this undertone of more serious topics because they're always talking about women's rights. And especially with this one, because Hattie is really naive and she knows how important women's rights is, and she's always thought that, but it wasn't until she got married that she like really clicked for her about how much her husband could do to her, basically, and how much she could take from her and things like that she would have not thought about before because she'd never been in that situation. And so it was just really fascinating to see this. I also felt like this was one of the most realistic wedding nights I have ever seen in a historical romance. Like, just this whole situation of how unprepared she was and how much she was so curious and questioning everything and, like, I don't know, was nervous, and just everything about it, I was like, that's exactly, yeah, that's what I like to see in a historical romance, because that's exactly what, you know, these girls are going through. And I just loved their banter. I loved their conversations. They definitely, I wouldn't say is primarily a hate to love, but it does have some of the vibes of that. So if that's a trope you like, I think you would enjoy this, because like I said, they don't outright hate each other at the beginning, but it does have that kind of feel to it. And it does take place partially in Scotland. So if you like that, that's fun too. I just really liked it, and I also like loved the way this ended, because it just kind of, I don't even know if I can explain it without spoiling it. It's just, it felt right for these characters. It felt right because Hattie had never really been on her own. She'd never really left her house. Like I said, she's been super naive, she's been super sheltered, and so it just kind of is her exploring who she is a little bit throughout this book. And I really enjoyed that. Also, she picks up photography, so it was really fascinating learning about how she's trying to learn about photography, especially at this time. So Evie had to do so much research as far as photography goes and trying to say the right thing. I don't know. I loved it, okay? It's great. I gave it 4.5 stars. I then picked up the 4th volume of Dreaming Sun by Ichigo Taganu. I am sure you guys are tired of me explaining what this is about, but it follows a girl named Shirahama, who basically runs away from home because she doesn't feel loved there, runs into a man in the park, and he says, hey, I got a super cheap place for you to live, but I've got some conditions, and so she ends up living there with a couple of boys from her school, as well as this landlord, and it's just been so much fun. I love it so much. It's definitely like a found family trope, if that is your thing, but this 4th volume, we really got to see into the backstory of our landlord character, who I'm pretty sure we didn't even know the name of. We just called him the landlord, to be honest. And so it was really fascinating to see his backstory. I was reading this in the living room, and I scared the crap out of my husband because there was a reveal near the end of this book, and I about threw this book across the room. I was so shocked. There are 10, so I've got a little ways to go, but I do own 5 and 6, so I can make my way through, and I am loving it. So, did I tell you how much I gave this? Because I did give this one 4 stars. Should it have been 5? Maybe 4.5. I was a little confused. There were sections that I was like, wait a second, let me reread this again, because I don't really know what's happening. But I don't know if that was just me not remembering what had happened in the end of the 3rd book, or if that was just me not paying attention, or if it actually was not greatly written. I don't know, but it got 4 stars, and I loved it. And, oh, I cannot wait to continue. The next book I picked up is actually the book that I ended up DNFing, and that is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. So like I said, I DNF'd this, so I don't have a star rating for this because I don't rate my DNFs, but I did make it about 43-ish% of the way through. I made it almost halfway, not quite, and I just didn't care. Like, the very beginning was really fascinating to me. I liked this world. I liked the setting up of this world. I found it really fascinating, but the execution was not great. So this follows, I'm not even going to be able to pronounce our main character's name. Agnieszka, maybe? And it's in this world where they live next to a very cursed wood. And there is this magical wizard person who lives in a tower, and his name is the Dragon, and every 10 years he goes to this village, he finds a new girl, she comes with him for 10 years, and then after 10 years she is released, and he gives her like a dowry, she's got all this money, and then she ends up staying at home for a couple of weeks and leaving, and kind of going off and doing something grand. And so it is Agnieszka's, I think, she's at the right age, and so she and a few other girls who I think have to be born during a certain time and that kind of thing, are kind of gathered, and they all are sure that it's going to be this one girl specifically, and then it ends up being her. And so she goes to live with this dragon and kind of be a maid of sorts to him. And so it's their It's that story, but it also has, like I said, a cursed wood, and I didn't realize that the wood was cursed, or like the forest was going to be a cursed forest, because I've noticed recently that those do not appeal to me. I've read a few books like that, and I've always given them only about 3 stars at most, because I'm always bored. It's always the same stuff, and so I didn't know that was going to happen in this one, and I realized about 30% of the way through that I just did not care. And I tried to force myself to continue reading, but I realized if I did actually like force myself to read this book, it would at best be a 2-star. So I decided just to go ahead and DNF it and not waste my time. I didn't particularly love the writing style. It felt a lot of telling, not showing. It felt very disconnected at times, because like we would be having like dialogue between characters, and then the dialogue would stop and the prose would start, and it would explain that next portion of their conversation, and then it would go back to dialogue, and I was like, that portion could have been dialogue. Like, it didn't need to be explained. It just, you could have just left that as dialogue, and then we could continue with this conversation, and it wouldn't have felt disconnected or broken up in any way. But it did, so I didn't really like that. And then also, I'm pretty sure this is supposed to be a romance between the dragon and Agnieszka, and I hated the way that he treated her. He treated her awfully, like not as in like abusive in a sense, like not like physically abusive or anything like that, like he never touched her, but at least to where I was. But he called her an idiot every chance he could. He was verbally abusive to her, and like she just kind of took it, you know, and like she was really strong and like strong-willed and had a good backbone and like could stand up for herself. But I just, like I said, I was only 43% of the way, and I think there was supposed to be a romance between them, and it just did not feel realistic to me. Now, I might have made that up completely, but I don't know. I really didn't like it, and I just felt like I was wasting my time, and I was forcing myself to read the book just for the sake of reading it. So I put it down. I decided to just not even worry about it. And then I picked up Other Words for Home by Jasmine Warga, which is a middle grade book that follows our main character, Judah, who is from Syria, and she grows up in Syria with her mom and her brother and her father, and it's in this very kind of touristy trap of a town there. And so her father like works in the equivalent of like a convenience store, basically. And then some things start happening politically with the government, and she and her mom move to, or just go to visit America, where the mother has a brother there, and so he and his wife and their kid take them in, and so she starts going to an American school. And so it's this culture clash of still wanting to have all of the culture of Syria, and then also having this very Americanized brother. It's also written in verse, which I found really fascinating, and it just feels, it was just very well written in my opinion, because it's this culture clash for this girl that she's got to just deal with, you know, what she loves from her culture, how she grew up, and what she's learning in America. And then at this time, Islamophobia is really at a rise, and so she is kind of dealing with that at the same time as, like, in her culture, young girls don't wear hijabs, but once you get your period, you start wearing a hijab, and while she's in America, she gets her period, and so she starts wearing her hijab, and it's something that she's super proud of, and just seeing everyone's reactions to that is very interesting, as well as it being from her perspective. Like, she's a young girl. I'm not entirely sure what grade she's in, but this is for younger middle grade. So I would say probably like 4th, 5th, maybe even 6th grade. I'm not sure. And so because she's different, her cousin doesn't want to deal with her, and so she's got not a whole lot of friends. And then also she's worried about her brother and her father, who are in this very politically tense situation, and she's got a friend back home that she hasn't heard from in a while. So it's very like stress-inducing for her, and just to see her throughout this whole thing. I thought it was such a great story, especially for younger kids who want to be exposed to new cultures, or younger kids who are not used to seeing themselves in books and things. You got this. Like, that's one of the things that the author wrote in her author's note, is that she was tired of not seeing herself in media and not seeing herself in books and things like that. So she wrote one for her younger self, and I think that's just stunning. So yeah, I adored this. Did I tell you I give it 4 stars? Because I did. 4 stars. And then my absolute favorite book of the month was The Ravens by Cass Morgan and Daniel Page. This book I loved everything about it. So I gave it 5 stars. Shocking, I know. But this takes place on a college campus, and it's dual perspective. It takes place between one girl who is in a sorority and one girl who's pledging for that sorority. And that sorority is called Kappa something something. But they're known as the Ravens, and they're very selective of who is in their sorority. And if you're in the sorority, you know why, and that is because you are a witch and the sorority is actually a coven. But if you are not in the sorority, you just think that they're super selective. So it follows 2 girls, like I said. One is named Vivi, who is a freshman at this college, and she starts to pledge for the sorority. She has no idea that she has magical powers, so you see her kind of learning magic as she's pledging. And then you also have this girl named Scarlet, who is a junior, and she is the pledge master, and she is wanting to become the president of the Ravens. And so they end up being big and little, and they really don't like each other. But there's also this super mysterious element to it with something that happened in the pledge histories, or the sorority's past, specifically with Scarlet and her best friend. And I just find it fascinating. It's super witchy. I've never read Dark Academia, but I suspect this is very similar in vibes, maybe super light Dark Academia, but it takes place in that school setting. They're learning witchcraft. It's like that kind of fantastic things. And then you've also got a mystery element on top of it. There's a murder happening. Like, there's a lot happening that would give it that Dark Academia vibe. But it's perfect for this time of year. It definitely, like I said, has that witchy vibes, and I liked the magic system. I thought it was fascinating because it's all based on a card deck, and I'm not entirely sure if this deck of cards is primarily like a tarot deck, but it's definitely like a card deck that is kind of explaining how things are done. And I just think it's really fascinating, and I loved the relationships between our characters, and I loved seeing these 2 girls kind of come together to solve what's kind of going on with their sorority, because some weird stuff starts happening. And it's just, everything about it made me happy. So there is a sequel to this. It's going to be a duology, and I believe that book is called The Monarchs, but it doesn't come out until January, and I'm a little bitter because I wanted it right away. But I thought this was written very well. I loved the characters. I loved my time reading it. I just got sucked in immediately, and yeah, it was great. And then the last book I read, I just tried to sneak one in real quick at the end, and that was A Court of Frost and Starlight by Sarah J. Maas. Now, I ended up giving this one 4 stars. It's a very short, I'm not even sure you could call this a novella, because it's about 230 pages, but it's kind of a bridge book, in my opinion, from the first 3 in the trilogy, or in the series, the ACOTAR series, and the new book, A Court of Silver Flames, that just came out recently. So this is a good winter book, because it does kind of take place in their equivalent of Christmas. And it just, like, there are some things that are needed, I think, to continue with this series. I think there are some things that are talked about that are going to become very important topics and important themes in the next book, especially because the next book follows, I believe, Nesta and Cassian, and there's a lot of like stuff about Nesta that we learn in this book. But there is it's a very bridge book. And the one problem I had with this book was actually the writing. It felt very spoon-feedy almost. Like, you always need that portion at the beginning of the book to remind your readers what happened in the last one, just in case they didn't reread the last one before this one, or it's been a little bit since they read the last one, just to remind them what's going on. But it felt more than that. It felt very, like I said, spoon-feedy, like she was spoon-feeding you this information and kind of talking down to you almost, as if you had no idea what was going on, as if this was the first time you were stepping into this world, which is not at all possible, because like if you were first time stepping into this world, nothing would make sense in this book. However, this did kind of awaken in me the want to pick up Silver Flames, which I don't think I'm going to be able to get to until December, unfortunately. Maybe November, we'll see. But I want it. I need to know, because there are some chapters in here between Nesta and Cassian. Actually, there's one chapter in here between Nesta and Cassian that I'm like, ooh, I need to know where this goes. I will say it's a little jarring at times, because it does switch back and forth between first person and third person, because this is written from almost everyone's point of view. We get Reese, we get Nesta, we get Cassian, we get Feyre, I think we get more at one point. I don't think we get Az, and I don't think we get Elaine, but we get everyone else. And so, like, when you're in Feyre or Rhys's point of views, they are first person, but if you're in anybody else's, it's third person. And so it can be kind of jarring and kind of confusing, but it did make sense for the story that was being told. I did feel a little awkward in some of those other perspectives beyond Feyre's, just because I think they were new. I don't think she's ever done anything in anyone else's perspective, except for like maybe one chapter at the end of the second book. But it was good. I really enjoyed my time reading it. I'm glad that I read it because it, again, gave me that bridge and that want to pick up the next one. And I think there are some important things that are talked about in here that are going to become important in the rest of the series. But it was just... it was okay, you know, 4 stars. I liked it. And that's it. Those are all of the 15 books that I read in the month of September. I don't really know what happened. I broke. Or I unbroke. But that's really all I have for you guys today. I hope that you enjoyed. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I have mentioned in this video, or if you participated in either Magical Readathon or Bookopoly-thon, or just something that you read in September that you loved. Let me know all of those. But if you like this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you want to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there, as well as other fun bookish links, so don't forget to check all of those out. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!